So my name's Shad Griffin. I'm a data scientist, distinguished data scientist at IBM. Been with IBM about 10 years or so. Before that, I worked at Verizon. I led the data science department at a Verizon business unit for about 13 years. So add them all up, I've been in the data science field for about 27 years. Originally, I did go to UNT, my master's degree in economics from UNT. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some career paths in data science. So this is a little bit more esoteric than the really detailed discussions we've seen so far. Just kind of give you an idea of really, if you want to be a data science, give you an idea of the kind of data scientist you can be. Before I get started, does anybody want to offer a definition of a data scientist? There's no wrong answers, but I will tell you this, and I often joke that if you put 10 data scientists in a room and ask them to define data science, you wouldn't get 10 definitions, you'd probably get 15 or 20, and those definitions would be very strong opinions of what they need to be. So I'm not even sure what one is, to be honest with you, and I think it varies from person to person, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but yeah, there's no consensus. So if you don't know or you're not sure, I'm right there with you. There we go. So one of the things I think it's important to understand is that the data scientist is kind of a new thing. I think this chart really describes it pretty accurately. So I just pulled this off the internet, and Indeed.com is a job search engine. So if you want a job, you can go in, type what kind of job you want, and classified ads for different openings will show up. So what this chart is showing you is that if you would have gone into Indeed.com in January 2011 and put data science or data scientist, you wouldn't have got much. It would have been basically zero. But then look what happens in January of 2011. It takes off like a rocket ship, doesn't it? So why is that exactly? I don't know. I really don't. It was interesting to live through this because people like me have been doing data science type of work for years, but nobody called us data scientists. In fact, I became a data scientist in 2015. That's when IBM actually created the job category data scientist. Before that, people doing data science were managing consultants, managers, predictive analytics analysts, something else, but they wanted data science. This whole concept of data science and data scientist is really pretty new. A lot of people point to this article right here as kind of a turning point. Honestly, I think it's more complicated than that. But this came out in October of 2012, and this was in the Harvard Business Review, and this article, as you can see, calls data science the sexiest job of the 21st century. And after this, or around this time, you just see kind of this mushrooming of data science. So I don't have a definition for data science per se, but what I can say, and I think most people would agree with this, is that if you're going to be a data scientist, you're going to dabble in one of these, in all four of these areas to some degree. And I was just thinking as I was sitting here that at the top where it says math and statistics, that really should probably say just modeling and include statistical models and natural language models. But it doesn't. It says math and statistics because I didn't think of that until just a few minutes ago. But if you're a data science, you're probably going to be building models, right? Some kind of models. But you're also going to be doing other very important things. Database and programming, it's also very, very important. You're going to be writing Python code. You're going to be interacting with SQL databases, NoSQL databases. You need data to put in your model. So you're going to have some understanding of the programming and the data to be effective in data science. Another thing that often goes isn't mentioned is your domain knowledge. That's another very important aspect. For example, if you're working on a problem in, let's say, for a petroleum company, it's going to look very different than a problem, let's say, for an advertising agency. So domain knowledge is actually very important as well. And then finally, probably the most important thing is communication and visualization, because you can do the greatest work in the world, but if you don't communicate it effectively, you're not going to be very successful. Any questions about that before I move on? All right. So if you imagine these four things in a kind of a two-dimensional space, whoops, where each data scientist is kind of a bubble, right? A circle or an ellipse. And depending on your job, you're going to kind of branch into these four areas to some degree. Like for example, this yellow circle right here. I used to have a job like this, right? I worked directly in front of a client. So I didn't do a lot of hands-on modeling, but the people I consulted with and worked with did. So I had to know all that stuff, right? But most of my job as a data scientist was knowing about their industry, knowing about their business, you know, providing advice to them. Also communicating, you know, and representing my company and our products and services to best suit them. But again, I couldn't forget about the math and statistics or the modeling and the database and programming, because the guys I was working with knew it, and that's what they did most of the time, and I had to know it too. So that's one kind of data scientist. You know, my job I have now is kind of, is definitely leans more towards the modeling and the database and the programming, but that doesn't mean that I don't have to have those soft skills to understand the industry I'm working in, understand the context of the problem, and be able to communicate my results. So what I would say to somebody who wants to get into data science is draw your own circle. What kind of data scientist do you want to be? Do you want to be one that focuses exclusively on the modeling, you know, and only dabble in the database and the programming and the soft stuff? Do you want to be someone that covers it all? That's the great thing about this field, even though it is hard to define. And when I stood up at the beginning and said I didn't know how to define it, that's not a bad thing, because you can define it yourself. Any questions?
So I want to know, were there any changes of being a data scientist compared to the other titles after it comes in?
Yeah, mainly from a technology perspective, right? Because the technology, what you didn't see on that chart, you saw how the jobs, you know, the number of people calling themselves data scientists and the number of companies looking for data scientists, you know, increased exponentially. So did the tech, you know. Back in the day, it was pretty much logistic regression. You know, that was the most sophisticated thing we were using, you know, back in the aughts in the 90s. Now that's obviously different. And I mean, we've heard today about, you know, deep learning models with 28 billion parameters or whatever. It's the tech has definitely changed for sure. So is the databases and the computing. I grew up as a SAS programmer. Most of you in data science probably will never program in SAS, but if you were a data scientist in the 90s, if you didn't know SAS, you weren't doing much work. It was kind of the thing to do. Now it's all Python and R and whatever.
So I would love to ask about, as a data scientist, how did you sharpen your communication skill, and what would be your approach when you present your findings to your stakeholder?
You know, I would say that's, everybody has to have their own style. And, you know, it really depends on what your personality is. And everybody has to kind of find their own style. You know, me personally, I'm kind of a quiet guy, more introverted. So I have a more subtle approach. Some people are going to get up and, you know, be more gregarious. It just kind of depends on finding the balance, or finding a communication style that fits your personality and that you're comfortable with, because if you're not comfortable, you won't be very effective.
So I just want to ask, from this visual, you can see there is there's a large yellow region that's common for all the four quadrants, right? So what level of domain expertise is required to be a data scientist from a master's level of student, like who is graduating, who has a couple of years of work experience? So what kind of domain knowledge is expected?
That's a good question. But domain knowledge is something you pick up on the job for the most part. So the new hires we have at IBM typically have very little, just honestly, but that's something they have to pick up along the way. Because like I said, it's very important. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Glad to connect with any of you. Thanks for the time, guys.